Greetings, friends. Oz here from planetOZ. And you know, our news lately has been reporting that you Earthlings have been having some difficulties with division among your peoples. Things like race and sex and political persuasion. And we get it. We went through the same thing here on planetOZ. For the longest time, the Locktungs and the Chloragons could not get it together. But eventually they did, because they realized something. And I'm going to share with you what that thing is. planetOZ. What follows is an integration of esoteric concepts as interpreted through the lens of planetOZ. As with all things, it is presented before your wisdom to be made with what you wish. Okay, I'm going to show you a series of images here. And as to what exactly it is that is being captured in these images, that is a bit of a mystery, which I'll talk about a bit more in a moment. But I'm going to make the case that what we might be seeing here are beings. In other words, this might be an approximation of what you or I, or really anybody, looks like when we are out of our flesh and bone skin suit, so to speak. Okay, so the source of these images, these are all screen grabs that come from videos that people have posted online, and these videos are called things like mysterious orb in the sky, or what are these strange lights, or saw this in my backyard, is this E.T.? And so as you can see, they're all kind of similar to a certain extent. They all kind of have this look about them. And it's important to note that what I'm showing here is still frames, but here I've got a little bit of motion video for you to check out. And you'll notice something about this in that while it is pulsing, you can see it kind of doing this pulse, it's not flashing. There aren't any flashes to be seen in any of these clips from which these orbs are pulled, these stills are pulled. They all look like this. And every terrestrial aircraft, helicopter, plane, whatever, everything that we have that's flying has flashing lights on it. It's by law, it has to. So when you see something like this, when you see a mysterious light, a mysterious orb, glowing orb in the sky that's just kind of hovering around like that, when there isn't any flashing, it is not an aircraft. It has to be something else. One factor that has a tendency to fuel the mystery of what these lights in the sky are is the fact that they never seem to be in focus. These images are, it's what ends up showing up when the lens is trying to find what it's supposed to focus on. And our cameras are really, especially with our smartphones, they're not very good at capturing something like a little point of light in the night sky. The contrast is really high, and they will seek and search and try and grab, but they just really fail. Even professional camera gear has a hard time with something like that. It just fails to really capture and get a clear in-focus image, and that can be particularly frustrating for the type of UFO aficionado that is typically the one clicking on something that's called mysterious orb in the sky. What are these crazy glowing lights over my house? So people will tune in, they'll see these videos, and then they'll say, why can nobody ever get the shot? If there's a disc there, why can't you get the disc? Why is it always this kind of thing? And it reminds me of comedian Mitch Hedberg. He used to joke that Bigfoot was blurry. He said, there's a giant blurry monster out there. And so consequently, it was as if, the reason all the pictures are blurry is because Bigfoot himself is blurry. But he may have been onto something. If you've watched my other planetOZ films, you might notice that I have a tendency to render characters like this. And I put them kind of in this, it's 2D here, but it's basically a sphere of light. And typically I do that when I'm talking about reincarnation, which I tend to do quite often. So essentially what you've got here is this sphere of light, and then inside that is the character. And the idea is just to kind of point out that as we're traveling through the cosmos on our infinite eternal journey, we will take many forms. And so the form inside might be the woman, as it is in this case, but the truth of who she is, in fact, who all of us are, is actually this sphere of light. So I'm using it in that way to render it. A lot of esoteric writings will take a negative position on technology. They will say that it's a crutch, that there isn't anything it can do that we can't do naturally or organically. In other words, with our consciousness. For example, you could travel among the stars with a spaceship, or you could astral project there. You can do something in a physical way, or you can do it in a non-physical way. So supposing for a moment that you were able to astral project and you were sailing along through the night sky, would we be able to see you? Well, maybe. And maybe that's what these are. That's not the case that I'm making for sure, but that's what I am theorizing with this. And I have some more details I'm going to add into the mix here as to this idea, the whole like Bigfoot being blurry. And so now we have, let's just suppose, we can see a being in light form, kind of this sphere of light, out of body, non-physical state. And we take a camera and we try and focus on it, and then perhaps we end up with something like this. And I really enjoy encountering something like this when I'm trying to puzzle through an esoteric mystery of some sort, because this is an opportunity where I can bring my many years of filmmaking knowledge into the conversation and see what that might lend to it. I think when it comes to these grand mysteries that we are all trying to puzzle our way through, it's useful for us all to bring our most specialized tools from outside it into the conversation and see if we can shine light on it from every possible angle. So I'm about to do that now. So here's a blurry picture. This photo is out of focus, and as you can see, you can't really make out the details, you can't really make out the edges. You can tell it's some trees, but there's nothing in the entirety of this picture that is actually in focus. And so what is going on there, in the most basic sense, is here I've got the camera here, and this tree, And right here in the middle, that's the plane, that's the focal plane of the camera. So this is what the lens is focused on. So when you are rolling the focus on your camera, you're moving this plane back and forth, and it can go through and past the tree, and then you'll be out of focus again, and then you pull back, you got the tree in focus, then you move that way, and it goes back out of focus. So if, in this particular instance, if a subject were to be standing right there in the middle, right where that focal plane is, there would be something in focus. But since there's not, and the camera is just sort of focused on this plane in the middle of nothing, you end up with an image like this that is out of focus. So here is a shot where you can see the cinematographer is focused very cleanly on the subject, the woman in the foreground here, and then you have your background in which things are out of focus. But in particular, you'll notice these light sources, these points of light, and light is a little bit different than everything else that we capture with the camera. It behaves differently, and it has different properties, and that's going to become really important in what we're talking about here. So you've got this, we've got her nice and sharp, those things, those out of focus, and when a point of light, a light source, is out of focus like that, it is referred to as bokeh, B-O-K-E-H. And so here is a nice image of some light sources and this bokeh effect. And bokeh is a big deal. To people who are into photography and cinematographers, a lot of energy, a lot of thought, and a lot of interest goes into the different kinds of lenses and how they handle out of focus light sources and how they treat bokeh. So this is like an important aspect that people really want to get right. And here you can see something peculiar about the character and the nature of light is that even though this picture is out of focus, it's different than the trees in that in these trees everything is kind of blurry, smudgy, there aren't really sharp edges to it. There isn't really anything that your eye can grab onto that has any fidelity. The whole thing is just kind of mushy in a visual sense. But in this photo, while we know intuitively we are looking at point sources of light that are out of focus, look at the edges of these spheres. They're sharp. They're still. It's not like the tree photo. It's different. We are definitely not on the light sources with our focal plane. We are not. If we were, we would see very fine points of light. We are instead somewhere off of it. It is causing these light sources to be out of focus, but nonetheless, they are representing as spheres. And part of the reason that they're taking the particular shape that they are, in this case the circle, is due to the nature of the shutter and the shape that is taking, which, as you can see in this example, is typically a circle. So what you end up with when you see that bokeh is a bunch of circles. And then people do some cool tricks. They will make shapes. There's some hearts, stars. People do all kinds of really cool things. In all cases, what we're looking at here is these are all images of all of these things are point sources of light, and what is giving them the shape is what the photographer or the cinematographer is doing with the camera. As you can see here, there's something, you mask it out and you cut the shape, and when you make the heart shape like that, you get a result kind of like this. with your bokeh. Okay, what's so different and what is so special about light? Well, in the case of our tree image here, where the tree stops is the end of the tree. So the tree is either in focus on the focal plane or it's not. There is no additional tree in between the tree itself and the camera lens. It just is where it is, and that's the end of it. But light is not exactly the same. Light is not just the point source where it's at. It is actually extending out beyond it. Energetically, it is basically shaped more like a sphere. So in this image, you can see how if you were to have a point of light represented by this tiny dot in the middle of this, and then all around it, light has an energy that is actually forming something of a sphere. And so that sphere is going around from the point of light, and it is cutting through the focal plane that the camera is focused on. So even though the camera is missing the actual point of light, if it were to get that light source in focus in and of itself, the focal plane would have to be back here. So even though it's not there, it's actually off of the point source of light. It's nonetheless the case that that light is different, and that light is emanating out around it. There is no tree in between the tree and the camera, but there is light in between the light source and the camera. It's more than just the point. So in 3 dimensions, if you were to look at this orange and you were to imagine that this little dot here is the center, in the center of the orange is the point of light, the actual light source. The rest of the orange is energetically the sphere of light that is around that point source. Then if your focus plane is not right on the line, but actually off, so it's not on the source, but it's slicing through the energetic sphere that surrounds the light, you end up with what you're seeing here, where you end up with basically it's a bokeh. We're out of focus. We're not focused on the plane. We're not focused on the middle dot in the center. We're focused somewhere slicing through the sphere of energy. And because that sphere of energy is extending out beyond the point of light, it means that there actually is something to focus on. So we are actually capturing a cross-section slice like that and seeing this in focus if this were representing the light. I get it. You can't just trust some Yahoo on the internet who's going to throw up a drawing you made and say, hey, look at this, a being is actually an energetic sphere of light. But don't take my word for it. There are people far more brilliant than I, like Leonardo da Vinci, who will tell you the same thing. So this image, which probably all of you have seen, is the Vitruvian Man. And there is some really cool sacred geometry stuff going on here that I just mentioned is fun to explore. It's really not the nature of this film, but definitely worth checking out. So there's sacred geometry, but most importantly, Da Vinci is telling us something with this and saying that if you look at how the bottoms of the feet line up, where the fingertips are, and how this all measures out, and seeing that it fits into a perfect circle or a sphere, actually, is not a coincidence. He is basically making the same point and saying that the truth of what the being is the spherical shape of energy, and that the form that is being rendered inside it is something of a hologram, and you can render forms of countless variety inside, but the sphere is the point. The sphere is the truth of the being. And if you look at the line that goes up and down and the line that goes across the middle, they intersect just about right at the navel. And so next I want to take a minute or two here to talk about why and how this all ties together into our big thesis of this particular film. Okay, here's a drawing of a wonderful, awesome, amazing person, and you can see that I put in the red, orange, yellow, green, light blue, indigo, violet, basically the energy center colors or the chakra colors in there. And the purpose of this is that, as many of you probably know, the chakras are all, the energy centers are all associated with different things. And if you were to ask somebody just walking down the street, where is your identity? Where do you believe your identity to be? Most people would probably say, oh, well, my identity is in my mind, or my identity is in my heart. But according to metaphysical and spiritual understandings of the energy centers or the chakras, your identity is not in your heart or your mind. Your identity is the orange energy center or the sacral chakra, which is at your navel. So that seems a bit counterintuitive to think, well, the energy center is at my navel. Why would that be? But part of it would no doubt stem from the fact that as you poured into this dimension as a being, taking shape in living form, you literally poured materially through the umbilical cord. You poured into this space and grew out from there. So the first bit of you, the material part of you, started from there, expanded from there, and it ultimately is the moment when you first actually are assuming your own identity for the first time. In other words, for 9 months you are a part of your mother, and the two of you are inextricably connected through this umbilical cord. And so it is at that moment that that cord is cut that you actually assume your independent individual identity for the first time. And so getting back to the Vitruvian man image, so this would be the cross line, the horizontal line, the vertical line, where I was pointing out earlier, they intersect right at the navel. And so this all ties together in this idea of identity, because where is the identity then, actually? The identity then is exactly in the center of the sphere of energy, the sphere of light. So, when we're looking at our form, in our human form, in our body, and everything we know about it, and everything we identify ourselves as in this form, we say, well, it's my identity is my head, my identity is my heart. But if we are to step back from that and think of ourselves instead as a sphere of energy or a sphere of light, it would make sense then that the identity would be located exactly in the center. And so in some of my other films, I've kind of looked at this a lot of different ways, and just consistently it makes sense and it feels right. The forms are rendered inside the sphere of light, many, many different forms. There's a narwhal, and so you can see what I'm getting at here with all of this. That energy, that sphere, that's you. And all of these different things and all of your different experiences become all of these different forms, but they're all rendering in the core truth of what you are, that sphere of light. Okay, so do I know for a fact that this is a recording of a disembodied entity hovering over some teenager's house and terrifying him? No. Can I prove that any of us can astral project or have out-of-body experiences? No. Do I have a way of knowing that we reincarnate and we have constant forms that change as we render them inside this sphere, that we create holograms and avatars of ourselves? I don't know any of this for a fact. It's all theoretical. But it's worth considering because there is a lot of evidence and there are a lot of reasons to intuitively sense that this might be true. And if it is true, it means that the real you, the real me, the real any of us, we don't actually have a race or a sex or an age or a political orientation. We're not even actually human by default. We have countless forms that we will experience in our cosmic journey, and even so far as we are human, the race, sex, age, whatever we are this time around is only this time around. You've probably been everything else. You'll probably be many more things. So when you encounter division and people at odds over things like this, you maybe just want to think about it the way we look at it on planet Oz, and we say, hey, we're all equal in the night sky.